Good morning, everybody. Rare that I get to begin a speech with a good morning, but I appreciate that you've weathered the storms and you've made it here. A little small vignette that happened yesterday as an introduction. But before I begin, I want to thank Mrs. Ackerman for her incredible efforts. Please give her a hand. She, together with all of the volunteers, they selflessly come out and they sacrifice much time. And it is a tremendous chus for the Rabbim, and it gives an entire structure and meaning to the summer for many. You know, a lot of times when the kids are going to camp, I tell them, learn something. It will change your entire summer. Yes, the summer's meant for relaxation and vacation and enjoyment. But if you have Torah at the centerpiece, if you have growth at the centerpiece, then everything, it becomes a summer of growth, and it is cushioned by the relaxation and the vacation, but it changes the entire summer. And so you should be zoiche mit Hashem to get much nachas and gesund mit Hashem. For Deri Deris, Hashem should pay you back for all your wonderful efforts. Thank you. So yesterday I was in Camp Agura. I'm not really even sure why. I didn't have kids there. But I'm like a little puppy sometimes where, you know, on visiting day you just follow, just drive. And I decided I'm going to be, as we get to the bungalow, my brother-in-law and now it's time to go. I had to go speak somewhere. And of course, just then it started to rain. It didn't just start raining. And I became a man in the wilderness. I faced raging rivers of mud. And as my wife and daughter are walking, I said heroically, you know what? You stay here, I'll go get the car. What a man, what courage. Hopefully investing in my future that I would be considered the hero. And it's mamish pouring buckets. And to me it was pouring buckets where she was standing too, but at least it looked like I was doing more. Sometimes men do that. So I quickly run, and I'm mamish like jumping over puddles and into puddles, and I was very proud of myself. I had like rain boots on, but I'm totally drenched. And I get to the car and I'm pulling on the door, and the door doesn't open. I said, really, Hashem? That's what I said. And then I looked inside and I said, oh, it's not our car. So I promise this is all true. And then I went and I found my car, which was a few cars away, and I quickly ran and I got to my car and I started pulling on the car, and the door didn't open. I'm like, this has to be, it's my car. I didn't have the keys. So Mr. Courageous ran back through the mud, through the water. I went and I told my wife, I don't have the keys. And she goes, and I quickly ran and I got whatever. Okay, so it didn't quite work out, but I got a message from there. And it is sometimes you can be pulling on the door and you're pushing and you're trying to get whatever it is that you want. And you feel like you're locked out. And the reason is because we don't have the key. If we have the proper words, the proper understanding, and the proper effort. I was zeicher to be in Deal over Shabbos. It was magnificent. Deal is like mamish. If you think the Catskills is full of Yidden, Deal is the hub. It's amazing. I happen not to be Sephardic, although I'm thinking of converting, but you should know. Either that or Hasidus, but I'm just not but it was amazing. There were mamish gedolim all over the place. I spent Shabbos with Shlomo Kanievsky and Rabbi Feinstein and Rabbi Brudny. It was just amazing. But there's also Rabbi Meir Yedid there. He spoke to a crowd of literally 1,000 people. And it was just an amazing asifa. And he said a beautiful little deher. He said, Siyata Dishmaya means help from Hashem. it doesn't mean Hashem is going to do everything for you. You got to do your part. And Hashem is there to help you every step of the way. But we have to take the initiative in whatever it is that we're doing. In whatever it is, in whatever effort you invest into, whatever project you're working on, a personal project, a family project, a personal journey of growth, whatever it is that you're doing, you have to take the first step. So let's take the first step. This is the beginning of the 3 weeks. It started a few days ago. And I'd like to talk about the concept of hearts. Everybody's got a heart. And everybody knows the importance of utilizing our heart properly. But I think we may discover a few things along the way. I want to share with you 2 very, very personal stories. One of them is mamish personal. The other one I'm privy to as a little bit of an outsider, but I'm intimately aware of the circumstances. And they're both in the middle of happening now. So there's no happily ever after ending yet, but the truth is that we know in Mitzvah Shem will be happily ever after. That's the end of every story. The story of the Jewish people is happily ever after. So I want to tell you that my father has one brother. Baruch Hashem, my father should continue to be gesund. His brother got sick about 2 weeks ago, my uncle Ephraim. He went in for a fairly simple procedure, and as will often happen, the hospitals don't know what happened, but he got an infection and he became very, very sick. It got to the point where he became totally unconscious, and they had no way of stopping the downward spiral. So my father called me and he said, "Would you mind? I'd like to go visit my brother in the hospital." So I said, sure, and one of the advantages, one of the milas, I'm zeicher to have my mother-in-law here with, I'll say my favorite aunt, but I don't want my aunt from my mother's side to get, but my aunt is here as well. And my in-laws, I've always lived around them, but my parents moved about 7 years ago, very big schus. And my father, one of the big privileges of living near your parents is you have an opportunity. They've given you so much. Every once in a while, you can give back, and it's nice to have my parents around. So my father asked me to come by, and I get to his apartment 10 minutes later, and I get a text. "Please don't come." It's from one of my cousins who's in the hospital, together with my aunt and my uncle. "Please don't come. It's not a good time. They're intubating him now. They're bringing him to the ICU, and they're intubating him." So I said, "Daddy, I don't think we should go." They said they don't want us here. My father's one of the least aggressive people I know, and I said, "What do you want to do?" And he said, "I think I'm going to go visit my brother." So I said, okay. So I brought my father down to Hopkins, and going to Hopkins is a little bit of an avodah. You have to travel down there, and walking, it's not easy for an older person to walk all the way till you get to the front steps. It's quite a journey already. And we get there, and my phone is buzzing off the hook. And I get 4 WhatsApp messages from my cousins. "I heard you're here. Please don't come upstairs. It's not a good time." So I said, "Daddy, I really think we should turn around." And they're giving us our tags and our ID to go up to the ICU. And my father very quietly just says, "I'm going to go up. I'm going to go see my brother." So I said to my father, I said, "Daddy, they don't want us there. And Uncle Ephraim's unconscious. So why are we going?" And he told me something that I will never forget. And I don't think you should ever forget it either. He told me, "Maybe my brother will hear my voice, and maybe he will be mechuzik. He will be encouraged. He will be mechuzik. He will be encouraged." And when I heard that, it made a tremendous roshim on me. It's not just my brother or my sister and your sister. But so very often, we see someone, we know someone, we're friends with someone, and we sense that they're going through something. And most of us take a hands-off approach and we say, it's really not my place. Or as my teenage girls would say, Daddy, it's not the type. You also have teenage girls, I guess, okay. It's not the type, as if I'm from a different planet and I don't even understand. But it is the type. Because maybe my brother will hear my voice and they will get chizuk, and they will get encouraged from it, and they will get strengthened from it. Back to our story. I go up to the ICU, and my father says, are you coming? I said, no, I'm not. I'm going to be respectful. It's not my place. Daddy, I understand that you have to go see your brother. I stood at the nurse's desk, and my father went to go see his brother. And he came back 10 minutes later with red eyes, and I didn't really ask him the specifics of what he said, but I said, are you happy you went? He said, very happy, and they were happy as well, as my Aunt Libby would tell me a few days later. That's what 60 years in a relationship will do. And we get home, and we get a phone call. We're just going to delay the intubation a little bit. There's been a turn for the better. This is not a miracle story. But my father, about 5 days ago, I saw him at a vart or a chasana, and I said, how was your day, Daddy? And he says, I had a very interesting day. I said, what happened? He said, I got a phone call. Uncle Ephraim called me. And he says, my brother called me. And he says, Yechiel, I cried for 2 minutes straight on the phone. Again, the next day I went to go visit my uncle together with my father. And just to watch, first of all, Baruch Hashem, the tenderness of a relationship between brothers, only members of the family, that immediate family that are alive. And my uncle was speaking coherently, and a nurse walks into the room and she says, boy, I did not think we would ever see this. I'll mention a number of times today, we don't connect the dots in Shemayim. That's not our job. Yes, it makes for great stories, but we have no idea if that's really what's happening. But there's no question that truth exists. Maybe my brother will hear my voice. Maybe they will be mechuzak. Maybe they will be encouraged. And it's true for each and every one of us, and we all know people that are going through things because there's no end of things to be going through. Everyone has tsaras. That's what we're here for. We're here to embrace the package that Hashem has given us and to give it back to Him. I'm reading a book now. It's not a published book, but it's a book that my daughter got by her graduation. She didn't read it. But it's a book on Mrs. Esther Tendler. And who was a remarkable, remarkable woman, Rabbi Yosef Tendler's wife. And it's kind of a guideline to motherhood. They have to put it out, and you have to read it. I want to tell you 2 tidbits. Number one, somebody came to her and said, what do? I cry out to Hashem, help me with my children. Help me with my children. And she said, that's the mistake. Not help me with my children, Hashem. Help me with your children. They're not my children. They're his children. We've been entrusted with those beautiful children, and we have to do the very best we can with them. We will make mistakes, sometimes awful mistakes, but we can also try to rectify those mistakes. That is our tafkid in this world. And the second little tidbit, and the whole book's amazing, but the second little tidbit I took out of there was, a mother came and said, Ms. Stenler, I'm not managing. She said, remove the word managing from your vocabulary. Managing makes you sound like you're in control of things. You're not in control of things, and you're not managing anything. Just take the next step forward. And this applies in every stage in life, from young mothers who can't find a minute to fall asleep to older mothers who can't stop worrying. Just take the next step forward. Don't manage. Just do what Hashem asks of us, which is try your best. So we have to do and give our hearts to one another, our hearts to our families, our hearts to our children, our hearts to our spouses, if we're zoiche to have spouses, our hearts to our parents. You know, the Rabbi Yechiel created a home. He asked us to build a home for him. And the home is the Mishkan, or the Makam HaMikdash. And the foundation of the Mikdash was the Mizbeach. That's where when we made mistakes, we went to the Mizbeach to offer karbanos, and Hashem accepted those karbanos. And the foundation of that Mizbeach was 32 amas by 32 amas, lave by lave. As long as it's rooted in heart, no matter how far we may seem from our destination, but we're on the proper path. Yes, absence makes the heart grow fonder. I think my original title was Distance Makes the Heart Grow Fonder. And I think probably you said you made a mistake, no? Maybe? Okay, maybe my mistake, I don't know. But I did intend to say... I'll fact check. Okay. I think it was... And the point is that when we're far away from something, sometimes that's when it's most dear to us. When you have everything, really, how close are you to Hashem? If everything is clicking on all cylinders, are we really that close? Do we need Hashem so much? But the further we are away from Hashem, the closer we are. Story number 2. I said over this story, it got some traction. I wrote it in a book, but you did not hear the second half of the story, which is absolutely remarkable. The story was told to me from a friend of mine. His name is Rabbi, and he davens right next to me in the summer. He's the manal of the 9th grade program. And Rabbi tells me the following story, that there's a Yid in Lakewood. His name is Bernie. Bernie Kishmai Kainhu. How many Bernies are there in Lakewood? And Bernie was a fellow, very lonely fellow, no family to speak of. It was unusually heavy. I don't know what his job was, if he had one. But the Olam would take care of him. And when the Olam took care of him, you know, they did many of his errands. Instead of going to the store, he would ask the kids, can you go to the store, put it on the bill, and I'll pay up the bill. One day, he came to Reb Leib's wife with a bag. Now, he didn't get around easily, so he knocked on the door and he gave a bag. He gave a bag to Reb Leib's wife. The bag was of his dirty laundry. And he said, would you mind? It's difficult for me to do my laundry. Would you do it? From what I've heard, doing laundry is not an enjoyable task. Even if you're doing your own laundry, if you're doing somebody else's laundry, it's definitely not an enjoyable task. If you're doing a stranger laundry, such a person's laundry, it's probably a very, very unpleasant task. But this woman is a tzaddikus, and she said, sure, no problem. Now, Rabbi admitted to me that he gave his wife the absolute worst anniversary gift of all time. He bought her a new washing machine. When I told it to my mother, she said, and what did he get for her other ear? So when he got this washing machine for her, something was strange with it. It was a lemon. It broke every 2 weeks. Until the day that Bernie started to ask her to do his laundry, and it never broke again. That is until the day Bernie died, and it never worked again. That night was a Motzei Shabbos, and on Motzei Shabbos, they started to prepare the Levaya. But Sunday morning, Reb Leib chapped. Oh my gosh, he sends kids to the store, and they write down on a cheshbon. And they don't want that Bernie's going to have to go to the Olam HaEmes with a cheshbon in the store. So he went to go pay the cheshbon in the store. The store opened 9 o'clock, at 9:15 he went to go pay the cheshbon. And the man, the non-Jewish fellow, says, you people are amazing. You're the 7th person that's walked in here this morning to pay up that debt. Unsolicited. Nobody spoke to each other. So, Reb Leib decided with a friend of his, they're going to make Bernie a birthday party. One time they're going to make him a birthday party. And he asked his friend, would you like to make it in your house? And the fellow said, you know what, now we'll do it in your house. And Reb Leib said, okay. Reb Leib is in his upper 50s, he's a Manal. All of the people involved in the story are either Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbonim, Menalim, Rabbeim. All upper 50s and above, some in their 70s. They made Bernie a full-blown party. Streamers, balloons, piñata. And when he walked in, they made a surprise. He knocked on the door. Everybody went to hide. So one Rosh Yeshiva is behind the cabinet, the other one is behind the wall, the third is under the table, the fourth is behind the couch, and in walks Bernie, and they go, surprise! And Bernie is standing there, and he starts crying. And they said, what's wrong? He said, it's the nicest thing anyone has ever done for me in my entire life. Birthdays are phenomenal. Happens to be I celebrate like for months my birthday before. I send reminders to my kids. My mother-in-law sends me reminders. Everybody sends reminders. Happens to be that I was sitting next to Reb Ruvain Friday night, and I asked him if Reb Moshe gave brachas on Friday night. He told me Reb Moshe did not give brachas Friday night. Reb Moshe would give a bracha on Erev Yom Kippur, not what's printed in the Machzor, just his own nusach. He would bench his children. And he also would give brachas on the children's birthday. Every kid got it. That was the birthday present. I don't know what else he got for the birthday, but he gave them a special bracha on their birthday, which is maybe I'll start that, but you should start it too, maybe. So he's sitting there in front of his cake, and the cake says, "Happy birthday, Bernie." And this fellow who passed up the opportunity to have the party in his house turns to my friend Reb Leib, and he says, "I can't believe I gave you my Olam Haba." That's the first part of the story. Second part of the story is going to blow your mind. Because about 6 weeks ago, there was a girl in Lakewood who was involved in a horrific accident. A 10-year-old girl. I don't want to go into details, but she had kimat no chance of living. And this girl, the entire world was davening for her. Chana Bas Esther. And she's fine. Mitzvah Shem. I spoke to her. I saw a picture of her sitting up. My wife spoke to her wife this morning. To the mother this morning. It's a miracle. It's Rabbi Leib's daughter. Again, I don't know what happens in Shemayim. But here's the point. If you give your heart to another person, if you give your heart to a friend, to family, to a stranger, to somebody who really needs it, the Ribbono Shel Olam will give you heart. Fascinating thing about the heart. You know what's the biggest Baal Chesed in the entire human body? The heart. The heart is pumping blood to all corners of your body. What shaykhs does the heart have to the toes? Sure, whatever you need. To the elbow, to the shoulder, to your back. The heart provides for everyone. Constantly, 24/7, the heart never stops beating, giving. And when you give with your heart, Hashem gives your heart. Raise your hand if you've gone to the Rebbetzin Rebbe's kever in Monsey. Okay. For those who haven't, I strongly recommend it. It's a beautiful place to daven. You can even take your children. It's not a scary Beis Olam. It's a beautiful Makom Tefillah. We were there on a Friday afternoon about 2 months ago at about 5 o'clock, 5:30 when I went. When I went, there were about 50 people there. Men, women, children, mothers with strollers. And when you're there, you can daven at the Ribnitzer's kever, and then the Vizhnitzer and the Skelener. And then if you're not Hasidish and you want to go, because you're like, you have to go to Litur Shagadol, so you go around to Reb Mordechai Schwab's kever. It's also a big place of tefillah. But it's an amazing, amazing, amazing place to daven. The Ribnitzer was a Baal Meifis, whatever that means. And the Ribnitzer Rebbe was once in L.A. and he gets a phone call. There was a Yid who lived in L.A. who had a massive heart attack. And they brought him back, but they said he needs a heart transplant. They finally arranged, he got to the top of the list and he got a heart. But when he got the heart, and I don't know how it works medically, but while he was having the operation and his heart was taken out of his body, the other heart was not working. And they couldn't get the heart to work. And they're pumping it superficially or externally, but they can't get it to take. And they call up the Ribnitzer and they say, what should we do? And he said, get a minyan together to daven to Hillel, and I will also daven. And an hour later, the fellow was alive. And when he came to, his brother was sitting at his bedside, and he said to him, can I ask you something? When you were out, do you remember what happened? Anything? And he smiled. He said, I remember exactly what happened. He said, what was it? He said, Bezdin Shel Mala was convening. They were deciding, live or die. The heavenly court was deciding, live or die. And there was pros and cons to whether I should continue to live. And then a man walked in. And the man said, I want to tell you something. 45 years ago, I came from Argentina. I don't know how this man knew who I was, but all I know is that I had nothing. And Erev Pesach, he knocked on the door, and he handed me money, and he said, I know you're new here, and I know you don't have a job yet. I just want you to know, here's enough money for Yontif, and if you need more, you can always come to me. He collected the money. He's not a man of means. And at that moment, they said, he gave his heart to another Yid. We will give him his heart back. And that's the moment that his heart began to pump. If you give, your heart will work. And there's nothing better in life than giving. We're not here to take. It's not even geschmack to take. It's geschmack to give to our family, to our friends, to strangers, to give. And sometimes it's very, very difficult because we're in a position where we feel like we need to take, but if you give and give and give, your heart will continue to work. Don't worry about perfection. Don't worry about, is it my place or is it not? Just give your hearts. Until now, we've spoken of Bein Adam Lachaveroi Be'ikr. But there's another aspect to giving your heart, and that is to give your heart to the Rabbi Yechiel. And sometimes when you're far from the Rabbi Yechiel, it feels like it's not working. When I was a kid, growing up in Cleveland, Ohio, it was a different world, but I went to Cedar Point. Cedar Point was a phenomenal amusement park, and there was a roller coaster there. And by the way, you know like how kids say they love roller coasters? So I didn't really love roller coasters. I liked roller coasters, but my brother hated roller coasters, so it was my way of upping him. So I said, these are great, I love roller coasters. And he was terrified and made me feel like better than him. But I loved going on roller coasters for one reason or another. And I was going up a roller coaster called Gemini. Gemini were these two twin roller coasters that were going up. I remember it was at a 73-degree angle they would go down. And then at one point, like my stomach felt like it was coming through whatever. And also, by the way, there's a time to stop going on roller coasters. A few years ago, we went with my family to an amusement park on one of these amusement park days, and my wife says, "Go with them, go." And I don't know how she convinced me to go on. I'll never admit to Hashem for the rest of my life go on a roller coaster. I think my mind somewhere got lost up on the second hill. It was absolutely, wasn't it great? No, it was terrible. But when you go up the roller coaster, you're going up and up and up and up. And it's so slow. And as you continue to go up, it's so terrifying because you're going higher and higher and higher. And when you continue to go up, that means at a certain point you're going to have to go down. And when you go down, oh boy, does it go fast. And then there's that moment when you get to the top, and then there's like a click and a pause. And then the next thing you know, you're mamish like in the depths of the earth. And at a certain point, I realized that that's kind of life. The aliyahs and yeridus, the aliyahs go so slow. Like one little click and another and another. It takes so long to climb that hill. And then when you finally go down, you fall so fast. You promise you're not going to speak Lashon Hara. You promise whatever it's going to be. And you work one day and another and another. And then, boom, you lose everything. Or so it feels. But then before you know it, you're going back up again. And it's bidafka that way. We're in the middle of 21 days, the Bein HaMetzarim, and those 21 days are really a mirror, says the Koshnitzer Maggid, of another set of 21 days that are coming up very soon, Rosh Hashanah through Hoshana Rabbah till Simchas Torah. Also 21 days. These are 21 days of sadness. Those are 21 days of happiness and closeness. But the truth is that the further away we are, the closer we feel. You know, sometimes the downs is a yerida l'tzoyrech aliyah. If you're never down, you can't go back up. And not only that, but if you never had the courage to try to succeed, you would have never failed. So be'etzem, every failure that you have in your ruchniistic growth is a success because you tried. The failure is only defined by the fact that you attempted to do something. That in itself is an aliyah. So the failure is an aliyah. And again, Hashem doesn't expect us to be perfect. So the aliyahs are aliyahs, and the yeridis, when we go down, it's also an aliyah. And we must never forget that. This 21 plus 21 equation of the ups and downs of the Yemei Bein HaMitzarim and the Yemei HaRotz and the Yemei HaAva is a combination of 42. 42, the Membeis Masois, the 42 journeys that every Jew, not only the Jewish people collectively take in next week's Parsha, but every Jew, says the Slonim Rebbe, takes each of those journeys. Some of our journeys are up, some of our journeys are down, but all of them, be'etzim, are journeys of growth, of movement forward. That's why we say every morning, V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha, and we say that Parsha of Shema, 42 words in the Parsha. Because the 42 words in that Parsha represent the Avas Hashem that we have, the willingness to be able to try that journey and to take steps forward, even though we know it is scary. Vayar es hamakoim meirachoik. In the greatest act of closeness that any human being ever had, which was Akedas Yitzchak, it all began with the rachoik. Avram Avinu was so far away. He saw the place, it was so far away. It seemed unattainable, unachievable. But whenever we set a goal, the goal sometimes feels like it's too far away. That's what makes the journey so joyous and so fulfilling and gives you the sipak hanefesh, to be able to feel like your neshama is being lifted. And even though we're in the Yemei Bein HaMitzarim, the days where it feels so distant sometimes from Hashem, days of sadness, we hear of tragedies, days that bring us closer to Tisha B'Av, the saddest day of the year. Mitzvah Shem, it shouldn't happen this year. It should be a day of Simcha, Mitzvah Shem. But we have to remember that those days, the journey very often is what brings the greatest joy. There was a young man. He eventually became Reb Pinchas Schreiber. Reb Pinchas Schreiber was the Rosh Av Bezdin of Ashdod. He was an Adam Gadol Ma'od. But his journey started in the most unlikely of circumstances and the most unlikely of journeys for a boy who was going to become one of the Gedolei Hadar. They lovingly called him Pinyala, and he and his family ran away from the Nazis. They ran up north to Siberia. And when they got to Siberia, they spent a few months there, but they were starving to death literally. And the back-breaking labor and the difficult journey caused his father to drop dead one day. His mother had just had a newborn baby, and Pinyala was just a little boy. He was 9 years old. And he had to bury his father with his bare hands. Okay, but it's a tzara that happened. They'll move forward. But less than a week later, his mother died of heartbreak. And it was just him and his baby brother. And with nothing more than the shirts on their back and maybe a blanket to try to keep them warm, he began to walk and journey. And he marched forward. And he continued to walk. He walked for 1,000 miles. Where he stopped, what he ate, when he slept, who knows? But eventually he got put together with the transport that became known as the Yaldei Tehran, a group of Yiddish Kinderlach, of thousands of Jewish children who came to Eretz Yisrael, and what the Nazis did not accomplish, the secular Zionists were focused and driven to do, to eradicate all sense of Yiddishkeit. And he as a boy remembers where he would stay up at night because they would come around cutting off payas, or when they tried to force feed him chazer. And in the meantime, he's taking care of his brother. And of those thousands of children, there's a few handfuls that survived with their Yiddishkeit intact. And he made his way to Yerushalayim, and by now he was 12 and his brother was a little toddler. And it was time for his brother to get a bris milah. And coming to the bris were Gedolei Yisrael, amongst them the brisker Rav. And the brisker Rav is sitting at the bris milah, and he says, "Nu Pinyala, Zogad Rasha." You're the Baal Simcha. It's customary that the Baal Simcha says a speech, says a drasha. Zogibra drasha. I don't have. I didn't prepare anything. I can't prepare. I'm just a little boy. Do you remember anything that you learned with your father? It was 3 years earlier. But along the way, he had held on to a few pages of Gemara in his mind. And he closed his eyes and he began to recite the pages of Gemara that he had learned with his father. He had lost his parents. He had had everything taken from him. He had protected his brother, and he had also protected a few pages of Torah. And when he finished his drasha, the brisker Rav was sobbing. Reb Meir Soloveitchik said that my father cried twice in his life. We're talking about a man who lost his wife and his children. He was crying uncontrollably. And he turned to Pinyala and he said, "Pinyala, that is the most beautiful drasha I've ever heard in my entire life." Pinyala would go on to become Reb Pinchas Schreiber. There's a beautiful sefer written about him called Va'ani Esho'er Levadi, and I remained alone. Why was it the most beautiful drasha that the brisker Rav heard? Were there chidushim that the brisker Rav had never heard before? It was a young boy saying over a Gemara. The answer is that when the journey comes from so far away, when there's so little of a chance of it happening, and you protect it, it becomes the most beautiful words in the world, the most treasured and precious words of Torah that Gedolei Yisrael and the Rabbi Shalom have ever heard. And it's true in the way we act towards our fellow friend, man or woman. It's true in the way we act towards the Rabbi Shalom. Yes, absence or distance makes the heart grow fonder, makes it more treasured, makes it more special, makes this period of time the most treasured or special time of the year. If we do have to sit on the floor on Tisha B'Av night, there will be moments, if you are Zoicha, closeness that you will feel to Hashem, a connection that you probably cannot attain even by Ne'ilah, because by Ne'ilah you're close. You're feeling the closeness. And on Tisha B'Av, we're feeling the distance. But sometimes when you're so far away, that's when you can be closest. That's when you are most treasured. But the Rabbi Shalom doesn't want us to cry. Yes, we have to cry. But the Rabbi Shalom will be menachem us. Because following Tisha B'Av will be Nachamu, Nachamu, Ami. And I want to end with a beautiful story. A number of years ago, we all remember it well, there was a terrorist attack in Yeshivas Merkaz Arav. And I believe it was 8 precious children lost their lives. And parents were inconsolable. They were broken beyond measure. And Chacham Ovadia came to speak to them. And Chacham Ovadia said to them, "I want to tell you a story." In 1970, Baba Sali lived in Netivot. Baba Sali, Rabbi Sol Abu Chatzeru, was one of the holiest Jews of the last 100 years. And he lived near a family that was having Shalom Bayis problems. How did he know they were having Shalom Bayis problems? Because they kept their windows open, and everybody knew they were having Shalom Bayis problems. So the first lesson is, don't scream loudly. So Baba Sali wanted to do something about it. So he enlisted the help of his brother, Baba Chaki. Baba Chaki was a Rav in Lud. And he asked his brother, he said, you're a rabbi, you're a Rav, you know how to speak to people. Come down to Netivot and speak to them and encourage them and show them how they should treat each other. Try to get them to understand. And he said, okay. And he came down and he spent hours with them, many hours. And he explained to both him and her the importance of communication and valuing each other and respecting each other. And by the end of the evening, they were on a little bit of a mahalach. Yes, it was going to take work, but they understood what they had to do. And they thanked him profusely. And he went to say goodbye to his brother, and he said goodbye to his brother, and he went back to Lud. But he never made it. He was killed in a car accident. And Baba Sali, an individual who knew the passageways and alleyways of Shemayim, was inconsolable. And he said, I couldn't have gotten a Rav to come from Ashdod or Ashkelon. I had to schlep my brother from Lud. It's all my fault that he died. It's one of the holiest people on earth. It's one thing to tell somebody else, but when it's you, it's very hard. And so he cried and cried until one night his brother appeared to him in a dream. And he sees his brother, and his brother's face is glowing and shining, and he says, my dear brother, it's all my fault. I'm so sorry. And he said, your fault? There was a gzeirah, there was a decree. And Hashem decided that this is my time. You know what you did? You facilitated that my pitirah, my death, should be through the opportunity to do a mitzvah, through the opportunity to be able to bring down the Shekhinah, because when there's Shalom Bayis, Ish v'Isha Zachu, Shekhinah shruya beinayim. You brought down the Shekhinah to this world. You helped me do it, thank you. What more beautiful way is there for me to go? So my brother, you're okay? No, not totally. Why not? What's wrong? What gives you pain? He said, because you continue to cry, and that crying breaks my heart. And he told them two words. Tafsik livkot. Don't cry anymore. You did good. You tried. You did what you're supposed to do. And Hashem orchestrates the world. And he did what he knows is best. But tafsik livkot. And Baba Sali woke up. And Chacham Ovadia told the parents, I know it's hard. Your children are in good places. And now it's time, tafsik livkot. The Rabbeinu Shalom knows that we have it very, very hard. Maybe we're trying to juggle more than any generation before us. There is no end to the worry, to the anxiety, to the tsar. There's no end to the people that yearn to have children and the girls and boys that yearn to get married and the parents that yearn for their children to be able to come back to the proper derech and for those children to yearn to be accepted and loved regardless. There's no end to the tsaras. But we're trying. We're trying to take one step forward every single day. The journey is a long one. It's been a journey of almost 2,000 years. And as we continue this beautiful march, a difficult march, but a beautiful march, because it's a march where Hashem is bringing out the best in each and every one of us. And we are discovering koiches that we knew or we didn't know that we ever had. And the Rabbi Shalom treasures that because it's that effort, those koiches, this journey that Emir Hashem is going to bring Mashiach. Thank you.